It was the summer of 1988. Nintendo was enjoying a large fan base with such hits like Super Mario Bros., Metroid, Mega Man, and Zelda, to name a few. These challenging games often led fans to share tips and tricks on how to overcome a game's many challenges. Nintendo took wind of this and made an attempt to collect them all into one publication, and thus Nintendo Power was born. Throughout its nearly 25-year history, it has always served as the go-to source for all things Nintendo. But in December 2012, this famous magazine came to an end, closing a chapter in gaming history. On this episode, we discuss the magazine and some of the things they did that left a lasting impression, not just in print, but in the hearts and minds of gamers everywhere, right here on Downloadable Content. Hello everyone, welcome to Downloadable Content. I am Brian, and with me we have Doug.
Hey, how's it going?
And only Doug. Ron is taking the night off.
I scared him away after Kirby.
But on this particular episode, we are discussing the end of Nintendo Power, and as such, the end of an era.
Yeah, oh man. It scares me to think of this as going away. Go ahead.
It was definitely a shock when the news was announced in August that Nintendo Power was coming to an end, and it just kind of threw everyone like what?
Yeah, I mean, so many people I know talk about they have that stack somewhere of all those old issues that they still hold on to.
Right. I mean, it ended up like 281 issues, I think, was the final total. But even though Nintendo Power's pretty much suffered the same fate as the magazine industry at large. It's not just Nintendo Power. With more and more of us getting our news and information online, magazines and newspapers are going out of print all over the country.
Yeah, and it really is just a sign of the times. So I think that a lot of people have been saying that the writing on the wall has been for a while, whereas especially with gaming news, gamers are so tech-heavy, they're ready to get that news, instantly as soon as someone makes an announcement at a conference.
Oh yeah, and with social media, everything's in real time now. You don't have to wait a month anymore for that next magazine, because by the time you get it, the news is old.
Yeah, and heck, even when you look at stuff like tips and tricks now, you can buy a player's guide the same day the game comes out, and things like that.
Yeah, if you want to,
Kind of ridiculous.
If you want to plunk money down on a strategy guide, you just go to GameFAQs.
Yep.
We have sites like that. But even though the writing might have been on the wall for a few years, and maybe not too many of us were subscribers of Nintendo Power when it ended, it was still kind of you could still count on that magazine because it had been around for so long.
Yeah. And it's, I heard a couple people saying that their reaction was, wait, the magazine's still in print? But at the same time, like we said, that pang of sadness, it's like, part of my childhood just ended.
Yep. And, as was the case. But we will begin the Nintendo Power discussion with a little history. We need some background information. So, as I said in the intro, it was in 1988 when the magazine started, but before it became the Nintendo Power we know and love, it started off as a short little magazine called the Nintendo Fan Club, which was, the precursor. And as I also said in the intro, it was largely inspired by The Legend of Zelda. For those of us who have played it and remember the sheer difficulty that the original Legend of Zelda was, there were a lot of people that were sharing tips and tricks because the game is not a very forgiving game. Just if you remember it, the game just starts you off right in the middle of Hyrule Field with no direction at all. Here, go.
Yeah. And I mean, I still play. I have to go back and look at that map every now and then, and having a source for that, like that was the big thing in the premiere issue was that fold out map of Hyrule.
Oh yes,
everything.
Oh yes, it was and people were trying to share tips and tricks. Which exact spot to use a bomb to blow up a section of wall to reveal a hidden store or whatever. Which order do I take the castles in? Where can I find special items? It's not like games today where you have a lot of information at your disposal. This was an NES game, so by default it was going to be extremely hard. And Nintendo got wind of people sharing tips and tricks and strategies on the game's many challenges, and Nintendo took it upon themselves to collect all of these tips and tricks, and it ended up becoming Nintendo Power Magazine. There was, and I remember this, it wasn't just Nintendo Power, but other magazines that came after it. There were whole sections devoted to strategies and cheats.
Mm-hmm. There was always that. I just remember that section of where it was just telling you, okay, people would write in and say, "Hey, I'm stuck in this part," and they would tell you how to go about doing it. And it was that fan community where I just look at that and think, this was stuff that's like, a couple times I had to go back, find that issue to actually get that strategy. But at the same time, I also remember this was such a great marketing tool because it's like, oh, okay, this game gets hard, but here's how you can do it so you can keep playing. And then, go ahead.
Instead of, throwing your controller in rage.
Yeah.
And with this magazine, Nintendo Power, it expanded its format. It wasn't just strategy. It allowed for reviews of games. And it basically ended up becoming the de facto source for all Nintendo news. Because keep in mind, late 80s, early 90s, no internet.
Mm-hmm.
No internet. We had things like mail, snail mail, and so every month you would get, what at that time was current, most up-to-date news. Didn't have social media.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have IGN or GameSpot or anything like that. And, there were some things in these early issues that became classic staples. They ended up, they would get discontinued, years later, like I remember the Howard and Nestor comics.
Oh, those comics, man. And it's funny because I remember like those vanishing, but they would put in like they started having like monthly features of like they did the Super Mario World comic and the Legend of Zelda Link to the Past comic. And this was, you get a couple, pages of this thing a month and would go on for several months just to go through the whole thing. And all these things that you don't see really anymore.
No, you don't. And it was kind of like a serialized story.
Yeah. But, I'm trying to remember. Now, what was it was supposed to be like? How was just like the Nintendo rep and Nestor was the diehard gamer.
Yeah, I mean, Nestor was the mascot.
Yeah.
And also early on, they began the idea of enclosing games with new subscriptions.
Oh,
They were kind of a pioneer in that regard. It actually started, a little history, it started with the original Dragon Warrior game, or Dragon Quest 1. The reason for the promotion was the fact that when Dragon Warrior was initially released in the United States, it didn't sell well. And so Nintendo had a lot of these cartridges, these unsold cartridges in stock. So they decided, okay, well, let's get rid of these cartridges by giving one to every new subscriber. As a result, they gained thousands of new subscribers.
yeah. These giveaways. I just remember all these things you got from subscription, like beyond the magazine. I remember getting like videotapes, like talking about new video games. It's just like it was basically here, have a free 30-minute commercial. But it got me excited for these games.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that was I mean, they would give away VHS tapes, which was kind of like the precursor to the demo disc.
Yeah, I remember getting the one about Star Fox 64, and I wish I could find that. But I remember it's like there's gonna be this thing that's gonna control your cheek, and I was like, sign me up, I need that. But all these things, like they had the what did they call it? The Superpower Club, where it's like that they didn't close every so often. Where it was just a catalog for Nintendo stuff you could order.
Oh, they were very, very, very good with the freebies.
Yeah. Something I still have. I think I'm gonna have to get a picture and pass it along to you. I got like it was either just a standard freebie or is something I got for renewing my subscription. It was a set of Mega Man X Pog. Like this was my introduction to Pogs. Was through Nintendo Power. Then I got like a little album to go with it. So I got to put more stuff down. So I got the Super Metroid set too. I still have this somewhere in my apartment. And it's probably the only Pogs I still own. But I have them because of Nintendo Power.
They're nostalgia, yes.
Yeah.
You're kind of like the nerd hoarder. It's a...
It bites me in the ass whenever I try.
Yes, I can see that.
But I mean that was the whole thing. Was Nintendo? You talked about what is a brand, and it's sometimes it's a company that makes you have good feelings. This is making you have good feelings about Nintendo, and they really put pushed in success, I'd say, the Nintendo lifestyle. I mean, this magazine is what kept me loyal to Nintendo for years and years. It's like, no, I'm not going to get a Genesis. I'm getting Super Nintendo because I'm a Nintendo Power guy.
Oh yes, it certainly fueled the fire in the classic Nintendo and Sega wars of the '90s.
Mm-hmm.
And you had the epic battle of Sonic versus Mario.
Yeah.
Mario would end up winning out because Sonic would die a horrible slow death and ended up becoming Nintendo's bitch. But
Yeah.
I remember one such promotion, namely when the game Eternal Darkness came out for the GameCube. Nintendo was trying very, very hard to push that game because it was the first M-rated game made by one of Nintendo's pet developers, Silicon Knights, who was an exclusive Nintendo developer at the time. That new subscribers, and also you could order it. It came with the soundtrack for the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I didn't play the game because of Nintendo Power. I ended up playing the game at a friend's recommendation, and I loved the hell out of it. But yeah, I mean, Nintendo was very good with their freebies. They knew how to gain subscribers, and later magazines picked up on that as well. I remember other fallen magazines like Expert Gamer and GamePro would also
Yeah.
have, especially during the PlayStation era, demo discs.
Yep.
They would include game discs or a collection of demos, not unlike what Nintendo did.
Yep. And just, but and we talk about it, it's just the thing I just will always remember was being so excited, like whenever I would get that in the mail, and for the longest time they had like some amazing cover art too. Like, and it was not always like first party from Nintendo stuff either. Like I remember like I remember a Ninja Turtles one that, like, of course, another huge thing that I was excited for as a kid. They had that Mega Man X cover for the first Mega Man X game that it was like all silver and everything, and just all these different ones that they keep throwing out. And it was one of those things that it was, once again, it got you so excited.
It was, again, I mean, as a kid, it was definitely something you look forward to. It was like candy.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to know, especially if you were, a diehard Nintendo fanboy, which meant for many of us were growing up before you had the interlopers of Sony and Sega and Microsoft.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember some of the other discontinued features they had. I certainly remember, I think they had a monthly feature for a long time with Pokemon.
Yep. Oh, they had like the Pokemon Center. It was like a magazine inside it. Like it was like a miniature magazine.
Yeah,
I remember.
I think it was called Poke Center.
Yeah, yep, it was. I remember that. And it was just devoted to that. And that was still when there was only one Pokemon game out.
I'm surprised actually they discontinued that, given the still current success of the Pokemon franchise.
Mm-hmm. Did that have a comic in that as well? I feel like it might have.
Did it have what?
A comic. Like it might have actually been the translated manga, but I feel like they had a comic in the Poke Center as well. But it was like a tear up thing too. Like you could take it out of the magazine; it was a separate thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else did they have? They had let's see, the NES Journal. That was the newsletter within the magazine. They had a feature called Game Over. This happened more toward its later run. It made its debut in 2006. This was a one-page strategy guide giving details on how to beat the final boss of a particular game.
Oh man, that's after I ended my subscription, but that sounds like a great thing to have. Yeah. Go ahead.
And obviously, what started off as a primary source for cheats and tips and strategies ended up fading away, as games were no longer having cheats built into the game or codes or things like that.
Yeah. The classified information section where they had all the hidden cheats and everything. I always remember that was like the first section I went to every month was to see. It's like, oh, it's going to be one of the games that I own, so I can finally do whatever.
I remember that too, and not just in Nintendo Power, but other magazines that I subscribed to or purchased as well. And I'm just like, okay, are we finally going to have information in here on a game that I have for once?
Yeah, exactly. But I remember also they would dissect, some of the. They always had that one game where they would go really in depth with, and I remember just thinking as a kid, it's like, how are they getting pictures of all these screens? Like, they'd have like a giant platformer, and they'd have like the entire level map visible, and it was just amazing that they were, because you figure that's getting shots of all these different screens and then stringing them together. It's given what they have now then versus what's available now.
Right. I think that's something that's definitely something that continued even right up till the end. They did usually have a feature, like whatever was on the cover. That was the feature game. They were going to spend a good chunk of pages devoted to that. So that wasn't something that went away. That continued into all the way through. One of the things I look forward to the most, though, with the magazine, and I'll probably close the first half with this, were the annual Nintendo Power Awards.
Mm-hmm.
This was a yearly thing, and they did give out awards for every single year.
Some of the stuff they had in those was just,
And
Yep.
I'm taking a look at the list of all of the Game of the Years they had from 1988 to 2011, and you had some of these wonderful, wonderful gems that make me feel all sorts of ancient, like Super Mario Bros. 3 in 1990.
Oh,
Mortal Kombat in 93.
wow. Jeez.
No surprise, 1995 Chrono Trigger.
Yes. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I also remember every month they had kind of their power rankings of like the best games of people saying, "Oh, these are the games to try," and stuff like Chrono Trigger and Super Metroid and Link to the Past just basically dominated that list for as long as they came out. And you'd see like once or twice would change like from second to third place and swap out, but they would just stay on that list forever. Some of those games.
As I'm looking at this list, I like how the Game of the Year winners have come full circle. The first one in 1988 was Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, and the final one they handed out in 2011 was Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword. So it began and ended with Zelda.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
In fact, on this list, there are how many Zelda games? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 Zelda games on this list. Zelda 2, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword. All ended up getting Nintendo Power's Game of the Year.
Jeez. Weren't they originally called, like, going back to the comic, weren't they originally called the Nesties or something like that?
You're close. Nestor Awards.
Yes.
They were called the Nestor Awards originally.
Mm-hmm. I have that image of, like, once again, their mascot, basically as a gold statue.
And I mean, I'm just looking at this list and seeing how many games I actually played. And I'm looking at the list, and every single one, nearly every single one of them is a Nintendo franchise. But then you have some of the outliers, like 1989 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Whoa, was that the first one, or
that was the 1989? That was the one for the NES.
That one, Game of the Weird. Wow, that game was painful. I gotta pull. Hold up. I'm looking at this list now myself. Wow, just the occasional outliers, like you said, like just randomly in 2005 Resident Evil 4, and then like you look all around it, and it's like leading up Metroid Prime, Wind Waker, Metroid Prime 2,
Super Smash Brothers, and then Resident Evil. One of these does not belong.
Yeah.
Although Resident Evil 4, just as a point of fact, won Game of the Year everywhere.
Yeah.
That wasn't just, I mean, at the time, Resident Evil 4, when it came out in 2005, was a GameCube exclusive, which
uh,
turned a lot of heads and pissed a lot of people off. It didn't
uh,
matter to me because at the time I had a GameCube and a PS1 and PS2, so it didn't. It's like, all right, pick your. As long as it didn't come out for Xbox, I was happy. GoldenEye 007, which is really the only James Bond game I've played,
yeah.
and made shooters relevant.
Yeah. I mean, then again, I mean, you look at this list. I mean, on one hand, you want to say, oh, it's biased towards the Nintendo, but at the same time, all of these games are very solid titles.
Oh yeah, these aren't just generic Nintendo titles just for the sake of we have to name a Nintendo game as Game of the Year. These were all, by and away, very, very good, popular, very well received. Donkey Kong Country. I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm.
Name me one person who's going to argue that, or I could see Majora's Mask. I wasn't really but I wasn't really that much of a fan of Majora's Mask. After the amazing masterpiece that was Ocarina of Time, I felt
yeah,
a little let down. Then I'm just thinking, Super Mario Brothers 3, and when I'm just remembering 1990, I was 5 when that game came out.
Oh, just total side note there. Now, do you remember? I'm trying to when the Fred Savage movie, The Wizard, where it was like, oh, you get to play the brand new game, and it was Mario 3. Oh man. But once again, you look at that Nintendo lifestyle that you're talking about, and that movie was basically a giant Nintendo commercial.
Yeah. Yeah. It really was, and the Mortal Kombat win in '93 shocks me, given how controversial that game was.
Yes, that's the one that just I keep looking at that and it just
huh?
It stands out like a sore thumb. Yeah.
But because what else came out in 1993? Star Fox, and Mortal Kombat won out over Star Fox.
But I could understand that, given that all of us know Star Fox 64, but the original Star Fox is kind of a lackluster title, I feel like, when you compare it to the rest of the stuff.
Yes.
And I mean, and if you're looking at this list once again, the year before is Street Fighter 2. So you're seeing that, the emergence of the fighting game almost.
Oh yes, the early 90s when fighters in the arcades just had their heyday.
Mm-hmm.
And all the parents up in arms. Oh, the blood! If only they knew then what fighting games would look like 20 years later. They would look at the original Mortal Kombat and laugh, like, wow, this is what we thought was going to doom our kids? But I digress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I digress. Let's see. I mean, we discussed Nestor. He was the longtime mascot of Nintendo Power.
Yeah. I think one of the things we haven't touched on just yet, is we talked a little bit about they'd have the in-depth feature on a couple games, like their cover article, so to speak. But they also put out, through Nintendo, did a lot of strategy guides themselves.
Yes, they didn't do just the guides or the mini strategy guides in game. They created full on strategy guides for some games.
Yeah. This is once again kind of their early days. I remember, this was either the first time I got a full year subscription or renewed or something, but I got like a set of strategy guides that I still have somewhere, and it was like a Super Nintendo one, Game Boy one, a set of codes for a bunch. Like it was basically a player's guide that was nothing but special codes for a bunch of games. I think there was a NES one too, and a couple others, but it was like a set of 4 of them that I still have somewhere. And
Yeah, there was
all from Nintendo Power.
yes, it's then they released I mean, Nintendo Power made a bunch of them. More than I mean, before they were originally, for really special titles. Like they were sent to subscribers at first, and then they made them, put out on newsstands so other people can buy them. But the originals, Super Mario Brothers 3, Ninja Gaiden 2, Final Fantasy 1.
I think there was one for the... Yeah, I was about to say, I thought there was one for the original Final Fantasy. Because I remember that was one I had, even though I never owned the game.
Well, good thing you weren't on the Final Fantasy episode. We were like, what?
Record scratch right there.
Yeah, you never played the original?
I have since rectified that thanks to PSP.
Yeah, yes. But then they started making a bunch of games, and you can actually buy the Power Nintendo Player's Guides at books. I find them sometimes at B&N.
Yeah.
Things like that. Although, but now they've outsourced them to Prima.
Mm-hmm.
So Prima now makes strategy guides for Nintendo games, and that's even if people... I don't even know if people still buy them, but...
Yeah, I feel like nowadays it's day one impulse purchase of, hey, you're buying the game, let's get the strategy guide at the same time, and they make it that that special edition thing.
Especially now with some games, I remember seeing... I see now strategy games that are hundreds of pages. Strategy guides that are hundreds of pages thick.
The one I remember seeing, the one for Skyrim, and it's like I have textbooks smaller than that.
Yeah, I'm like, what is this? A D&D player's guide?
Yep.
So that was, and I remember my stepbrother and I would get some of the player's guides. Was there for Mortal Kombat? I'm pretty sure there were.
Yeah.
I don't know if... I'm looking at the Nintendo Player's Guide list. Were there any for Mortal Kombat? No, there weren't. Not according to the list here. So, Nintendo did not put out a guide for those. I just remember buying a strategy guide for Mortal Kombat and my stepbrother and I fighting over, hoarding the strategy guide. Because we wanted the advantage. So... All right, we will...
One of these days, I was...
what were you gonna say?
I'm going to cave and have a moment of weakness, go on eBay and buy the Nintendo Power Chrono Trigger Player's Guide, even though I know that game like the back of my hand.
I was gonna say, you don't need the guide.
Yeah, I am the guide, but I still want that strategy guide. I wanted that so much as a kid.
So it is on that note where we'll close out this first half. So after the intermission and you have some lovely music, we will talk about the later era of Nintendo Power, right up to its cancellation, and our final thoughts about Nintendo Power. We can give Nintendo Power a well-deserved farewell for a job well done. And that'll be on our second half. You're listening to Downloadable Content, the end of Nintendo Power episode. We'll be back. Welcome back to our second half of downloadable content. Still talking about the end of Nintendo Power. We're all weeping, waxing nostalgia here.
Yeah. Oh, and while we were on the break, Nintendo Power players guides that I had readily accessible, and just this list of ones I have readily here was a set of Game Boy ones. That's the only official guide to cover 130 Game Boy games. So I have that. I have the Super Nintendo one that's just nothing but passwords. The Killer Instinct one, which I still have to look at every now and then. And these last two, I think, are the most probably unexpected and somewhat ridiculous player's guides, but they gave them to me, so I kept them. The player's guide for the Super Game Boy, as in the accessory that you plugged in. They actually made a player's guide for that. And the other one is a Pokemon Snap.
Oh, dear God.
Yes. But basically how to make sure you get everything in that. But yeah, those last two, it's like, I know they were just ones that I got for renewing my subscription, but it was just like, wow, did you really need a player's guide for this? I mean, looking through the Super Game Boy one, it's pretty funny because they basically, that accessory, you'd kind of plug in, the different color palettes to set up, and they actually went through and said, hey, this is the color palette that actually makes this game look kind of good, and stuff like that. So it was pretty interesting. I mean, it's definitely the thinnest of the set, but still fun.
Now that you've shown just how much of a nerd you are...
Was there ever any doubt?
Yeah, Pokemon Snap, for fuck's sake.
Oh.
I'm going to shift into the later era, when in 2007 Nintendo decided that for whatever reason they weren't going to create the magazine in-house anymore, so they outsourced it to a magazine publisher and developer called Future Publishing, which they do magazines, centering around technology all over the globe. They have publications in the United States, they have some in the UK, and Nintendo gave the reins over to them. So the Future era began in 2007, and obviously with the new publication company, they did some changes, but not too many. I mean, they wanted to keep what was making the magazine sell and what made it popular, and I actually think they did a pretty good job. They added some sections, obviously with the advent of the internet and things like that, and strategy guides and codes and cheats, they were fading away, so they obviously had to replace, some of that. So we got things like the Power Profiles, which were every month they would always do a couple-page interview with somebody important in the gaming industry. It was always, somebody important. They would do an interview. Let's see. Well, in the final issue, the interview was with the Nintendo Power staff. But I remember there were, I remember one such interview with Koji Kondo. And for those of you who don't know who he is the composer for many of the Nintendo franchises we know and love.
Yep.
And of course, that was him. You have him to blame for that.
All the wonderful earworms.
They did Power Profiles. They did something called Pulse, which was tapping into the gaming community at large. It used to be called Player's Pulse, which is basically your letters to the editor. But that was, I think, the case for pretty much the entire magazine's run. They added a section to review and discuss WiiWare and Virtual Console downloads. and then later on they further expanded that with the 3DS and the DS stores. They also started doing, they expanded the previews section, which gave you news on upcoming games. So things that you could definitely look forward to. They did keep the reviews. Obviously, that's a very important function of the magazine itself. They added something called Community, in which they devoted time to people who did things in the gaming world. Sometimes they devoted it to cosplayers. They do sometimes cosplayers or people who would make gaming-related merchandise. For example, I remember one such issue where somebody made a quilt that was basically consisted of World 1-1 from Super Mario Brothers. Oh yeah.
Man, I'm just thinking of like that evolution, and I feel like that's trying to keep themselves above water pretty well, because so many things you see now with gaming articles are like, hey, check out this cool thing that somebody made related to this game, and it's really taken off. So to be able to keep doing that even in print.
Oh yeah, it was a thing, and it's like, oh man, I want to buy some of this shit. And sometimes the people they would interview who did gaming related merchandise and art and things like that, they would put a link to a website where you could buy shit, and it was great. What else they did? Power profiles, downloads. Obviously, you mentioned the Nintendo Players Guides.
Yeah.
They started also once Future took the reins. I ended up buying, because they started putting out. And there's been several volumes of these. They would make magazines that were just posters.
Oh man.
They were basically a magazine. They were magazine thickness, regular standard magazine thickness, but they were posters that they were perforated. They were little posters. They weren't these big, huge, centerfold tear-outs. But each page of the magazine would be perforated, and you could tear it out as a small little poster. And I would buy these and decorate my cubicle at work with these. It'd be wall to wall.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
I think some of them are still available. I think you can find them on Amazon, but then they started putting out things like, calendars and things. So they continued some of the freebie things, although some of these you had to pay for, but some of them would be included if you were a subscriber. But I loved the poster publications. It's like, oh yes, more.
I mean, that was always the hardest thing for me, was those centerfolds that they had. It was like I always wanted one, but at the same time, that was so many of them was like, it's the back is like, oh, I need this map or something, or it would just be like, oh, I want to keep the magazine nice. But who is it? I think it's the Angry Video Game Nerd, who has like, you see his nerd cave, and he has all those centerfolds like all over the place. And I mean, you talk about, things that just kind of get you in that Nintendo lifestyle. Those posters, man. I know I had a couple of them, like decorating my bedroom as a kid. Like I'm sure I had like the Mario RPG one up in my room somewhere.
They also did, starting in 2008, they started making two different versions of Nintendo Power. One was called the Subscriber Edition, and the other was the Retail Edition that you could get in stores, because they came to the realization that people were collecting the magazines for the artwork on the cover, and so they started making a subscriber-only edition to the magazine, which wasn't your standard magazine cover, which was loaded with text and other things. They removed the barcode that you usually find on the front of the magazine,
Mm-hmm.
so that people who were collecting these, they didn't, we had the artwork. You could see the artwork. You didn't have the text or anything like that. In 2010, they also put out 2 special guides that were dedicated to Mario and Zelda. They were only available at retail. And they did all this extra stuff while trying to maintain the Nintendo fan audience. Even during, as the Wii was declining, there were some issues where it only had 2 or 3 reviews in it, because nobody was putting out games for the Wii.
Yeah. It's, and you look at all this stuff, and you can't blame them for not trying to save this magazine. They really, so much of this is, still trying to keep it up. So.
And even so, even they were trying to come up with new ways, new segments, new features. They had a feature called, and this happened right up to when they canceled it. Starting in March 2006, they had a section toward the end of the magazine called Playback, which was just a section that was reminiscing about retro games.
Mm-hmm.
The first game to be in the Playback section was Earthworm Jim.
Oh man, they actually did a cover article on that one, I think, of way back when.
Well, I'm looking right now because the last issue of Nintendo Power, which I have, comes with a poster that has every single cover. So there's one for Earthworm Jim 2 that I see. And, oh god, WWF.
Oh man, is that the one with Hulk Hogan's has a controller in his hand?
Hold on, I lost.
I remember.
Yes, it is.
I remember that one. Oh, that cover.
I'm looking at some of these, and I'm looking right at the Earthworm Jim. It came after the Donkey Kong Country.
Yes.
Magazine.
You got to answer me one question though. Is it, the Mega Man X one? Is that with the special silver cover, or do they just show the standard?
Mega Man. Hold on. There's 285 covers on here. Let me.
Make you do your work here.
Yeah, you are. What game was it? Mega Man X?
Mega Man X.
I see. There's Star Fox 64.
Oh, it'll be way before that.
Yeah, I'm looking. That's Mega Man. That's Star Fox 64. We're gonna go way before that. Turok. Oh dear God.
Oh jeez.
Killer
I want to say it's
Killer Instinct 2.
I want to say it would probably be 50 something.
I see Mega Man X2.
Yeah.
And you're saying there was one for Mega Man X. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, is it the silver one, or is it just the standard one that was underneath that?
I think it looks like the standard one.
Yeah. Because I remember there was one of those random special covers where they did a silver cover on the front as well.
Yeah,
and,
no, it wasn't.
You couldn't read anything on it, but it was still there.
But no,
I'd love to know. I'd love to know which character appears on Nintendo Power the most. If it's Mega Man or Mario or Link.
That is something we can discuss after the episode, because I would have to count them. I would have to count them, and I don't have time for that right now. But speaking of the final issue, all good things, as they say, must come to an end.
Mm-hmm.
So in August 2012, I woke up to the announcement that Nintendo was not going to renew the contract with Future, and that Nintendo Power was going to come to an end. Nintendo had no plans to continue the magazine after the contract. And from all of the articles I had seen, because when we're like, okay, why is Nintendo canceling, shutting down Nintendo Power? And from all of the articles I read, I basically got the impression that Nintendo really couldn't be bothered.
Mm.
They couldn't be arsed to renew it. I mean, they did not say why they were shutting it down. They just said they were just kind of unenthusiastic about the idea.
Yeah. It's and that it's such a tough pill to swallow because this was such a great market when it's what got people excited and that they're like, we don't need it anymore. Just you feel almost betrayed as a fan.
Say that again. I didn't catch that.
You feel almost betrayed as a fan.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was due to the fact that maybe they were losing subscribers again, the internet. But I don't really know. I mean, and also consider this: Nintendo Power up until it ended was the only magazine in the United States to be exclusively Nintendo. Nintendo Power was the only one. We had the official PlayStation magazine and the Xbox, but Nintendo Power was the only print source in the United States, and now it's gone. So now the US has no print media devoted to just Nintendo. So, I don't know why they decided to cancel. Nintendo has kind of been really tight-lipped about that, but either way, they announced that in August 2012, and the final issue came out December 2012. And as I got it and and read through it, I almost wept. I'll admit it. I'm man enough to admit it.
Yeah, it's. I mean, like we've been saying, it is a sign of the times, but at the same time, it rips your heart out because it was such a part of so many people's lives that I know. I mean, I had a friend in middle school. He lived like one town over, and it would always be a kind of a competition to see who got our issue first. And it's like, who would be able to talk about things before the other. Some days I'd get it first. Sometimes he'd get it first. Yeah.
So I don't know if this was put out for retail, but for subscribers, it came with a poster. As I said, it came with a poster that shows every single Nintendo Power cover.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at this poster, as just some of the things just make me feel really, really old, and some of the things that were on the cover of Nintendo Power kind of laughable, to be perfectly honest. Like Ken Griffey Jr.
Oh man, that one. He's like playing the game.
Yeah. He's on two of them. One of them.
Wow. I didn't know he was on a second one.
He's on a second one. Let's see. The Aladdin video game. We have a cover with Jafar on it.
Oh man.
There's another cover in which has Green Bay when he was a Green Bay Packer, Brett Favre.
Oh.
There's two of them with Hulk Hogan. I just found a third cover with Ken Griffey Jr. on it.
Jeez, what unholy union is that?
And then we get
so, some of these it was.
What
Go
were you
ahead.
gonna say?
Oh, I'm just looking at some of these ones right now, and it's interesting. The ones where it's like a sequel or else where it's definitely not like the main character anymore. Like you see like Vega for like Street Fighter 2 Turbo because they already did the original cover for the original version of Street Fighter 2. Oh dear. Oh man. There's this one with Pugsley from like the really bad Addams Family cartoon.
And then what about the one with Darkwing Duck?
Oh.
Or Lemmings? You look at it now and you're laughing, but these were the games we played.
Yep. Oh,
my complaint is, where's Peter Pepper? Where's Burger Time? And then just I mean, I just saw Wreck-It Ralph. They would have had a field day, but
but what's every so often there's that game that was like they were all excited about and just faded into obscurity. I'm looking at the one Stunt Race FX. Who remembers that game? Seriously. Like I was like I had to rack my brain for a moment. Like, why does this thing sound so familiar? Oh, but I mean, it's interesting too because you're hearing these people. I mean, you talk about these covers. I think you were mentioning what the final cover is, and it's basically harkening back to the very first one for like Super Mario 2, and it's that great cover kind of, and it's once again kind of brings things full circle. And
yeah, the last 2 pages of the final issue is a 2-page comic of Nestor and Max.
Wait, Max.
That's the name of the
I'm forgetting that.
It's Nestor and Max. Hold on. Nestor and Max, they were in the first 55 issues of Nintendo Power. It was part of, there was Howard and Nestor, Nestor's Adventures, Nestor and Max. So they were in there for the first 55 issues, came back again for a short while for one issue number 231, and they were in the very final issue as the final 2 pages of the final issue of Nintendo Power. And I read that, and I'm just like, oh dear. I'm going to need to compose myself in a minute. Because it's the end.
Oh.
And I want to know...
Is it as bad as the ending of Calvin and Hobbes?
Not quite. Not quite, but I want to know how many listeners out there, if they have Nintendo Power, subscribed to Nintendo Power at any point. I wonder how many of them have every single issue.
Oh.
I wonder who among you in the wide world out there have all 285 issues.
Oh, I would love to see a picture of that, because I know for a little while they were doing like the spine art and making like one long picture and stuff like that. So I would love to see that collection.
Including all of the posters especially during the early era, like the the big huge Contra poster and things like that.
Now, did you hear anything about the possibility of like kind of a fan magazine that people are trying to put together, like Nintendo Force or something like that?
No, I haven't heard anything like that, but I do know that Future has other Nintendo magazines. They're not in the US, but I will let you know right now. In the UK, Future has the official Nintendo magazine.
So
they had one which was just discontinued called Nintendo Gamer. But yeah, the UK has their own version of the official Nintendo magazine, which at this point is still in publication. Um, but yeah, that's. I mean, I know print is slowly dying. I know that. It's still just sad to see.
I understand it doesn't mean you have to like it, and that's been my kind of general feeling with the end of Nintendo Power.
And not just Nintendo Power as a whole, but I still am one of those people. I don't really read. I don't usually get most of my gaming news online. For some reason, call me old-fashioned, I still prefer to get a monthly magazine. Partially because I don't have time to just sit myself in front of a computer and, get the latest in gaming news. I prefer to have the comfort and convenience of a magazine that I can read at my leisure.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, the news might be outdated by the time it gets to me, but still.
Yeah, I mean, and I sometimes blame work as like if it's sort of like, oh well, you can read the news while you're at work and stuff, and it's like, well, I kind of have to do my job at work, and they've actually, for me, I'm blocked from. I can't even read articles about video games on my work computer. So it's sometimes it's nice to have that magazine.
I mean, I don't know too many.
Review everything.
I don't know how many of us have tablets. I mean, I know there are some video game magazines that have gone digital.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I don't have that. I don't own a tablet. Number one, and number two, I don't have the time. I still, want to have that magazine to be able to read at my leisure, but apparently I'm going to have to drag myself into the 21st century in terms of getting my game news.
We'll get you to join us kicking and screaming.
Yeah, I might have to get myself into the digital era of getting my game news, just like I dragged my wife kicking and screaming into the smartphone world.
Oh boy.
So, just as a point of curiosity, and for those of you who like, useless trivia, the very last review that Nintendo Power wrote, at least the last one in this final issue, was Epic Mickey 2, which they gave a 7 out of 10. In the final issue, the reviews were Assassin's Creed 3, Batman Arkham City Armored Edition, a lot of these are Wii U reviews, Darksiders 2, Epic Mickey 2, Just Dance 4, Madden NFL 13, New Super Mario Bros. U. I don't like the fact that now they're sticking a U at the end of all their titles. Ninja Gaiden 3, Nintendo Land, Rabbids Land, Scribblenauts Unlimited, Sing Party, Skylanders Giants, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed.
Wow.
Tank, Tekken Tag Tournament 2 Wii U Edition, Warriors Orochi 3 Hyper, and Zombie U.
Oh wow. Now you're mentioning how all these games have U at the end and stuff. That was one feature I remember at one point that I just thought was one of the best articles they ever wrote, and it was just some of the best games with the word "Super" in the title that weren't for Super Nintendo.
Yes.
It was such a great article. It was, completely tongue-in-cheek, but it was really clever.
Here's another thing. You might be nerd enough to remember this, because I certainly don't. They had a short-lived offshoot magazine called Nintendo Power Advance.
Oh, man.
Do you recall that? Because I certainly don't.
The name rings a bell. That's about it.
It was devoted to handhelds. They're handhelds primarily.
Yeah. But yeah, just that was the thing some of these articles is they weren't afraid to poke fun at themselves every now and then too. Uh, you know.
Well, I mean, some of them, because of some of the classic things they created, like I said, the Nestor man.
Yeah.
I mean, Nestor still came up even towards the end.
Yeah.
They still kept, with the occasional throwbacks.
Mm-hmm. So.
That's typically of how Nintendo is as a whole. I mean, you see it reflected in their games. They were not afraid to be lighthearted and, sarcastic and full of humor.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice change with some of the more serious gaming publications out there. But
yeah, at the end of the day, it's video games. They're meant to be fun.
Yes. And so Nintendo Power, I think, lived up to that expectation. And so, while it was very sad to see it go, luckily, reading on message boards and message threads about Nintendo Power's cancellation, it was very nice to see a lot of people, devoting some time recalling, some of the very good memories they had of the magazine. So it's while we're sad to see it go, you still remember, you still remember some of the childhood memory you had with it, because let's face it, a lot of us who read these magazines, we were all young kids.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm just repeating myself, but it was, a very big part of me. I mean, it was the first, magazine that I ever really subscribed to, for sure. And it was definitely something that's like, print is dying. I mean, how many of us still look forward to that day that we know we're going to get mail that isn't just, another bill, or just, oh, look, I may have won this contest.
Oh. So, thank you, Nintendo. Thank you for the memories.
Mm-hmm.
And rest in peace.
Yes, seriously. And if anybody out there has a collection of some of those posters that they want to get rid of, just get in touch with me.
Yes, you can find him. That's Doug Wilder on Facebook.
Yeah.
That pretty much sums it up. Nintendo Power lived a very long, healthy life, and all good things, as they say, must come to an end. So, if you have anything you would like to say, not just about Nintendo Power, if you want to add, comment, not just on this episode, but on any other episode of Downloadable Content, you can let us know at facebook.com/downloadablecontent or on Twitter at DLContent. So, all that remains to do is for me to thank Doug for being on this episode with me. And until next time, I'm Brian. You've been listening to Downloadable...
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Downloadable Content. Have a good one, everybody.